Merhaba Deniz.
Merhaba Ozan Bey. Bir saniye, bilgisayardan izliyordum ama.
Tamam.
Telefon.
Gayet iyi. Hem sesin hem de şeyin
Aynen.
iyi.
Sizi bilgisayardan bir kapatayım. Tamam.
İyi misin?
İyi geliyor değil mi sesim?
Çok iyi. Gayet iyi.
Tamam.
Şimdi hem son dönemde, yakın dönemde ilk konserini vermiş oldun Gülsün Onay'la. Ondan önce zaten Bilkent'te biz, gerçi sen master bitiriyordun ama ben master'a başlıyordum. Senin o anlamda küçüğünüm. Ondan sonra bir taraftan da oradaki Bilkent Öğrenci Orkestrası'nı da yönettin. Kısaca bize biraz bu son dönemdeki eğitiminden ve öncesinden bahsedebilir misin? Sonra seninle beraber zaten şeyleri, Amerika'dan gelenleri de şey yapacağız, konuk edeceğiz. Aralarda onları beraber çeviririz diye umuyorum.
Tabii. Ya ben piyanistim bunun öncesinde. Bilkent Müzik Fakültesi'nde Günler Hoca ile çalışıyordum. Sonra şefliğe merak sardım diye bir şey olmadı. Hep merakım vardı ama piyanoya da nispeten geç, yani 16 yaşımda geri döndüğüm için. Yani önce galiba. Yani ilk başta bir enstrüman öğrenmek tabii daha mantıklı gelmişti bana. Sonrasında şeflik çalışmaya başladım. Babamla başladım tabii, Erdinç'le.
Evet.
Paris'te eğitim gördüm. Dominique Huit, École Normale de Musique de Paris'de. Kendisi de Pierre Boulez'in öğrencisiydi. O yüzden çok yani structure üzerine bir eğitimdi. Paris bitince de Işın Hoca konuştu benimle, Işın Metin, ve işte Bilkent'te ikinci bir master yapmamı teklif etti. Tabii Bilkent Gençlik Senfoni'de de asistan şef olacağım anlamına geliyordu. Bu da çok güzel bir şey oldu. Çünkü podium timing. Yani Avrupa'da okumuş olan çoğu genç şef bilir. Yani pek 3 haftada bir 20 dakika yönetebiliyorsun. Yani bu çok güzel bir şey değil yani. Bütün bu hafta bahsedilen şeyleri de göz önünde bulundurunca, işte genç şef size mesela Naci Maestro'nun sorduğu soru mesela. Öyle. Şimdi de işte yavaş yavaş bir iki konser vermeye başladım. Tabii Covid ile iptal olan konserlerdi. İşte Hacettepe, İstanbul Devlet Senfoni var bu yıl. Öyle. Benim için bu yıl şeflik hayatıma bir nevi başlangıç.
Harika.
Başladığım yıl.
Süper. Videolarını da izliyorum ben şeyden. Nerede paylaşıyorsun videolarını? Senin kendi web siten de var mı?
Ya bir web sitesi açtım yakın zamanda. Daha paylaşmadım ama ben dizayn ettim bir şey. Dizayn ettim de. Bir site var. Çok kolaylaştırıyor zaten olayı. Bir de YouTube'da tabii. YouTube'da da paylaşıyorum.
Süper. Tabii senin peki Paris'teki eğitimin sırasında orkestraları yönetme şeyin oldu mu? Orada da öğrenci orkestrası gibi bir şey var mıydı? Mesela Şafak şeyden Kobay Orkestra'dan bahsetti. Sen gittiğinde de vardı.
Ben International des Arts diye bir yerde kaldım. Orada Artist in Residence olarak seçilince çok güzel bir binaları var. Böyle Bilkent Müzik Fakültesi gibi düşünün biraz o. Ve orada her branştan sanatçılar kalıyor. Müzisyenler, işte heykeltıraşlar, grafik sanatçılar, dansçılar. Ve oranın da bir salonu vardı. Ve bu kadar müzisyen, dedim bir de bir salonu var. Niye buranın orkestrası yok? Orada da küçük bir orkestra kurdum. Tabii lojistik olarak kolay değil. Çünkü 2 ay kalan da oluyor, 2 yıl kalan da oluyor. Ben 2 yıl kalmıştım. Yani tüm Paris'teki projenize bağlı. O yüzden işte bayağı uğraştım. 3 ay kadar orada bir orkestra kurdum. Ve bu zaten bir tepkiydi. Yani normalde yeteri kadar podium time olmadığına, yani biraz egoist şeydi doğrusu, ama gene de iyi şeyler yapabildik. Yani sitede Za'daki çünkü bestecilerin de eserlerini, yeni müzik eserlerini çalabilecek bir topluluktu. Bir de tabii genç solistlere de ilk deneyimlerini yaşattırabileceğim bir şeydi. Hatta Berfin Aksu'yla böyle bir konser yapmıştık üniversitede. Tabii eğitimim bitince de o orkestrayı da bırakmak zorunda kaldım Türkiye'ye dönünce. Öyle.
Süper. Şimdi bakalım Jordan'ı almaya çalışalım.
Bir saniye Ozan Bey. Ben telefonun bir şeyini alıp geliyorum. Çünkü
Tabii
bilgisayar
olur.
bağlanmayı bekliyorum. Sen.
Olur. Şu andan itibaren biraz daha tabii İngilizce olmuş olacak dilimiz. Deniz de ben de aralarda çevireceğiz. Ama her yeri çevirsek de. Henüz alamadım Jordan'ı. Bu arada Jordan Brown hem benim dönem arkadaşım, Amerika'da sanatta yeterlik yaparken, doktora yaparken beraberdik. O biraz daha genç benden. O hem cello alıyordu, bayağı yani lisanstaydı sanıyorum o sırada. Onun dışında da daha sonradan çok güzel Yale'de orkestra şefliği okuduğu, Jersey'de New Jersey Senfoni'nin hem de New Sussex orkestrasının orkestra şefliğini yapıyor. Onun şeyini de paylaştım ben. İsteyenler oradan da takip edebilirler. Web sitesini. Deniz'i kaybettik. Dur tekrar alırım ben onu. Bir Jordan'ı alayım. Kusura bakmayın böyle Amerika bağlantısı. Aslında bugün biz bir denedik Jordan'la ve gayet güzel bağlandık. Bakalım şimdi yapabilecek miyiz? Ben şey istedim. Amerika'da hani hem Texas'ta hem New York'ta orkestra şefi arkadaşlarım vardı. Oradan da haberler, onların yaklaşımını da duyalım. Onların farklı bir şeyleri var mı? Tabii ki ülkemizde pek çok yabancı şef, yabancı solist zaten sürekli geliyor. Bu arada geçen gün Orhun Orhon'la dün konuştuk. Bu arada Orhun Orhon ve diğer arkadaşların şeylerini, özetlerini yapmadım, farkındayım. Yarın yapacağım onları. Çünkü yetiştiremedim şeye. Deniz, yan görünüyorsun. Hi Jordan.
Hello.
Very nice to see you.
You can see me?
Yes, I can see you. And I
Outstanding.
can very well. And are you at your school where you teach?
Yes, I am at the Dalton School in Manhattan right
Okay.
now in a classroom, and I have taught here for about 5 to 12 years.
Oh,
At
okay.
this,
Okay. By the way, I should introduce Deniz. Deniz also newly graduated from Masters, young Turkish conductor. And
Yes.
we
Hi,
were,
Jordan. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
he will also help me to translate some of things that you say. We have been spent about 4 days with conductors and orchestra players, and we have been trying to talk about, or we have been trying to understand each other, what a conductor would expect from a very good orchestra player, and vice versa. So we were trying to define some of those subjects. I was wondering, how would you define a good orchestra player? And also, you can talk about the education of conducting in United States.
Sure, my pleasure. I think because of the nature of conducting, it's not every day that we stop and think about what conductors expect from players. And I think the reason is that conductors expect everything from players, right? They expect from players that they will be technically perfect, that they can simply, conductors, I think, frequently expect that we can follow our will, our imagination, and do with the music anything that we want, and we can be impatient when the players aren't able to do that. And so I think it's a really good question, because it's sort of like this is an examination of us as conductors and what we are demanding, or what we want. I think the question is frequently asked, what do the players want from a conductor? Right? And we frequently come to the same conclusions, that the conductor should be very sure in their opinion about how everything should be. These are almost cliches. It's come to be an axiom, right? That it doesn't even matter what the conductor wants if he or she has a very clear idea of it, you know? Even though not all ideas are created equally, we love conductors when they're decisive, because somehow then we don't waste time in rehearsal. And so we talk a lot about what conductors should do for the players, but what is the conductor looking for? I mean, I think that a conductor in general is looking to fluctuate this music very subtly in an improvisatory way. I mean, if you do a Brahms symphony where one movement is in the same tempo the whole time, it is impossible to conduct it in the same tempo the whole time. Everything flows forward and pulls back according to taste or the mood. And the conductor wants to have absolute authority to improvise that piece with the players able to accommodate.
Let us translate a little bit of this. That's why we are two people.
Yeah. Stop me. Stop me if you must.
Deniz, ikimizin olması iyi oldu. Sen başla istersen.
Jordan Bey bunun çok önemli bir konu olduğunu ve genelde sorunun tam tersinin sorulduğunu, yani orkestracıların şeflerden daha çok ne istediğini sorulduğunu söyledi. Ve tam tersi soruda da yani şef orkestradan ne bekler? Tabii ki yani bir şeften ne bekleniyorsa biraz aynı şey, ama ilk dediği şey de şu oldu, yani her şeyi bekliyor şef.
Evet, her şeyi
yani
bekliyor.
her şeyi bekliyor ve bazen her şeyi beklerken de her şeyi beklerken de biraz sabırsız da olabilme tehlikesi olduğunu söyledi maestro. Başka siz?
Ben de söyleyeyim. Şimdi orkestra şeflerin, esas orkestra şeflerinden beklenenin çok kararlı olması. Yani ne istediğini kesinlikle biliyor olması. Bu neredeyse bir klişe dedi. Onun dışında orkestra mesela bir Brahms yönetirken onun içerisinde neredeyse doğaçlamaya benzer bir esneklikle müziğin içerisinde var olabilmeyi ve bunu da orkestraya aktarabilmeyi söyledi gibi geldi. Ben oraları biraz atmış olabilirim dermişim.
Yok, doğru.
Değil mi? Yaklaşık olarak öyle demiş oldum. Okay, Jordan, we are ready for more from you. So you have been also conducting New Jersey and New Sussex. Is that how you pronounce the Sussex? Sussex.
Sussex.
Sussex. Okay.
It sounds like an English town or something.
Yeah, it sounds pretty British town.
Yeah. We are in New England here.
Ah, that's right.
So,
that's right.
yes, and you asked a little about the training of conductors here.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's interesting. I mean, in the United States, of course, you can do an entire course of study with master's degree and doctorate in conducting at many schools. So in other words, to be a conductor in the academic world, in the college music world, it's very formalized and there's a clear path, but that's not professional experience necessarily. And in the professional world, this is an art form that has been for almost forever seen as mysterious, you know, something that cannot be taught. And at the very least, it's something that must be learned in real world situations.
The other day, by the way, if I say something, the other day, one of our maestros here said, Karajan said once, 95% of education of a conductor is not conducting. Just 5% of is actually real conducting. The rest of it is just to be a very knowledgeable musician in general. You have to be knowledgeable about philosophy, aesthetics, even mythology and many things, because you are supposed to know, at least have some knowledge about pretty much anything that is around the musical things that you are going to conduct. Do you agree with that?
I do agree, but the 5% that is left is an enormous 5%.
That's right.
So what I think is, you know, I fall into two minds, and sometimes I'm thinking exactly like that conducting is nothing, that it's all being a musician and bringing to the work my experience as a musician and a reader and someone who loves music, and the last part is to hold the baton and do it. And then at other times that I have the other mind, which is that it's really a craft where you know, there are many excellent instrumentalists who suddenly decide one day they want to conduct, and while they may not fail at that, it's a special animal, I think, and it has a craft to it, where you know, the way that you it can be learned, but it's not nothing. So I'm of two minds.
Sounds great. Hi, Creg.
Hello, how are you?
Fine. Very nice to meet you. Actually, we have never met with Creg, but
Got me.
I with him and also inviting him to be here. So we have been talking about especially conducting and how you guys are getting your education in United States, because in Turkey we have master's and doctoral degrees on conducting, but we don't have undergraduate, for example. I wonder if you do have it. And also in Moscow, I know that they start with the undergraduate there. Most of the people who have good playing skills on one or several of the instruments in Turkey, if they also they also have some compositional skills, let's say, at least the education wise, meaning the orchestration, also to be able to read score and things like this, they get into orchestral conducting education, which I did 2 years ago, and I started my second master's degree. So in my late 40s. So if you have if you like to add things, especially about what do you expect from a good orchestra player, what do you think would orchestra player expect from a good conductor, and the conducting education in United States?
Sure. Let me go ahead and start off with just to continue with the topic of what kind of makes a good conductor, because the both of you were saying such great things, and that I would say we've talked about the actual conducting, physical conducting side, and we talked about kind of the musical side. I would add the leadership side. Like that, I see that there are 3 parts to being a conductor, and you have to be a good leader. You have to be a good musician, and then you have to be able to actually physically conduct. And the thing that we teach the most is the third. But I would say that the least important of the 3 is that it, like we said, it's important. It's a big 5%. It has to be there. But I'm sure we've all experienced situations where we have somebody who has terrible hands, who's an okay musician, but a great leader, and we have a great experience. And then we have somebody who has the prettiest hands in the world and is a terrible leader, even if they're a great musician, and it's terrible. And so now the thing is, you want all of those. You want to be able to do all of those, because we are dealing with human beings. We're dealing with individuals with their own backgrounds. And let's be honest, musicians are opinionated sometimes, and we've been working on our own craft for so much of our lives that we have our own something to say. So we have to be able to inspire, to lead a group of individuals to want to go in this direction. And what that looks like, and how do you teach that? There's so much psychology involved, and it's always different. Each orchestra has its own personality. Different levels have their own personality. So there's no one way to do this. And so it's, how do you teach something that's so not finite, but so crucial? And so I don't necessarily have an answer for you, because even now times are changing. It used to be that you had the tyrant conductor, and that's how things got done, and that's not so much the case anymore. And so how can we inspire an individual to want to strive for their own best? And then, of course, you have to be a great musician, not just on the technical side, but how can you, because it's even more than just a musician, but it's understanding not only the things on the page, but it's kind of the things that we tend to overlook, or the implications of a choice of harmony. Not just what is the harmony, but what are the implications of these things? Why did he do this? As well as understanding this within the context of history, that composer, everything, that it's such, that there's so much there. Every time I pull out a score that I did 10 years ago, I thought I knew something. And then I know a whole lot more, and I just realized how stupid I was 10 years ago. And then I'm sure in 10 years, I'm going to look back at now and say, I didn't know a thing. And then, of course, you have to be able to understand how to translate that, But even with that, it's like we've said, there's so much experience that's needed with that, because conducting it's such a weird idea. Like, I have an inner musical in an oral concept that I'm going to communicate to 70 plus people using my hands that you then need to translate and then reinterpret that into a musical response. And it's ridiculous when you think about it. And so it's one giant improvisation. And so it's learning, okay, I did this, that didn't work, let me do something else. Okay, let me do. And so there are times that it's, there are things that we do and that I teach students that I go, look, this isn't going to fit in any textbook you're going to find, but it works. Mm-hmm. And we need to communicate this larger concept, so do this, and so it's, and so realizing that it's not a one-to-one relationship. If I conduct this size, it is mezzo forte. What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything, but that we need to communicate a certain conceptual idea to elicit a certain response. So I'm going to do this other thing.
Yeah.
So I've spoke a lot. I don't know if you need to translate any of that.
It was very nice. It was very nice. Some of it I'm gonna translate, but in general, I got the idea. But also, I wanted to say it's interesting because as an instrument player, you start to learn your instrument, then you become a good musician. But you have to be a good musician to start with the conducting, I guess, in a way. If you have if your instrument is the conducting, the baton or your hands and your body in general, your posture, the way you act with your body, then you have like a couple of years or 3-4 years. For example, if you have a master's degree on it or after that a doctoral degree or something, that's 4 or 5 years. So that's an interesting part. I think. Let me translate some of it. Şimdi Deniz kopmuş oldu. O yüzden ben kendim devam edeceğim. Şöyle, şimdi orkestra şefliğinin eğitiminin nasıl olması gerektiğinden daha çok bahsetti Creg. Özellikle liderliğin önemli olduğunu, işte psikolojinin önemli olduğunu. Biz en çok aslında bu 3. kısmını nasıl kollarımızı, ellerimizi, kollarımızı kullanarak, bedenimizi kullanarak nasıl orkestraya yön vereceğimiz üzerinde bir eğitim yapıyoruz, eğitim gösteriyoruz ama bunu insan düşününce sadece bedenini kullanarak orkestraya aklındaki müziği iletebiliyor olmak tam bir delilik dedi. Çünkü biz neredeyse orada sürekli bir doğaçlama içerisindeyiz ve deneye deneye buluyoruz pek çok şeyi. Bazı kitaplarda bu yazmıyor ama ben zaman zaman bunun gerçekten işe yarayacağını öğrencilerime gösterdiğim zaman mutlaka iyi bir sonuca varıyoruz dedi. Ben de dedim ki bir çalgıcı olarak biz çalgımızla uzun süre geçirdikten sonra müzisyenliğimiz yavaş yavaş ilerliyor. Çünkü biz sonradan ancak repertuarı çalabilir hale geliyoruz. Ama orkestra şefliği eğitimi genelde yüksek lisans, hadi bazı işte mesela Moskova'da lisans döneminde başlayacak bile olsa, lisans bile sonuçta 18 yaşlarındayken, yani sen halihazırda bir müzisyenlik background'un olduktan sonra başlamış oluyor. Ve iyi bir müzisyensen ancak iyi bir orkestra şefi olabilirsin. Gerçi aynı şey belki çalgıcı için de geçerli. Okay, well I translated a bit of it. So George, just getting back to you again. So you play, I know you play very well cello, but also do you play any other instruments? For example, have you had some wind or percussion instrument or piano that before the conducting education started? Did you hear?
This for me?
Yeah, this is for you.
I didn't know if we were both cellists. Hi, Greg, by the way. Greg, you're at Stephen Austin, am I right?
Yeah, Stephen F. Austin.
Yeah, I think we have some colleagues in common.
Oh, very cool.
I know some people there from FSU days who
Yeah. Jen and
probably.
Evgeny.
Yes, for example. So yeah, I'm a cellist. Primarily, I played a little bit of bassoon in high school. You know, I learned instruments quickly. The only instrument that I didn't learn very easily was the piano, which was a huge frustration when I moved to Europe and wanted to pursue a career as an opera conductor. So you can imagine how that went. So over the years, yeah, I've tried to experiment with. I think when we talk about conductor training, I had a couple of quick points just to make. You asked about whether we offered undergraduate programs in the United States, and generally not. A couple of places have recently started to offer them. Miguel Hart Bedoya, I think, is starting an undergrad program somewhere in the Midwest, like Minnesota, maybe. And there's a school in California, Chapman University, had an undergrad conducting major. My friend Daniel created it. So that's still rather uncommon. And there's a sort of traditional assumption that musicians simply need to mature a lot more musically before they. Now, I would challenge that a little bit. I would say that musically there are certain individuals who are probably ready to begin an intensive conducting course of study when they are 19 years old, and could do an undergraduate program. But what's interesting for me is that leadership part that Greg was talking about. I think that what conducting needs from us in terms of maturity is exactly the non-musical part. And I've learned this, you know, through the pandemic, where I had to navigate some very murky waters to try to keep my orchestra on course, keep them positive, delicately manage some personnel issues that came up, and do it with both humility and respect for people. These are things that I would not have found easy as a younger person. And so maybe it's that component, that non-musical component that Greg was talking about, which is the real maturing that's needed for this work.
Let me translate a little bit of this. Şimdi anladığım kadarıyla Jordan pandemi döneminde daha da fazla bunu fark etmiş. Ne kadar ben şeyin altını çizmiştim. Herhangi bir çalgı, cellist olduğunu biliyorum zaten. Beraber cello okuduk çünkü. Gayet de ileri seviyede bir cellisti. Onun dışında piyano eğitimi almış. Fakat piyanoda biraz zorlanmış. Özellikle de Avrupa'ya opera eğitimi almak için, opera yönetmek için gittiği zaman bu önemli bir problem olmuş. Because when you were in Europe, when you were conducting operas, you are supposed to sometimes accompany the singers with the piano. Was that the problem?
Well, it's true in the entire opera profession that, you know, for really steady work there, you need to have. One thing that I learned that I think is interesting about opera conducting is I always came up with the assumption that if you had some decent piano skills, that you could make a career, you know, as an opera conductor, as long as you could coach a singer here and there. The truth is, to have a job as a coach at an opera company, you have to be a monster pianist, because the orchestral reductions that you play when you spend 3 hours in a rehearsal of Die Meistersinger is an absolute pianistic trial of the first order. Those opera scores are concertos. But you know, there's also unconventional little ways to get work in opera, and there are sometimes opportunities to be an assistant conductor where you're not asked to play. In some of the houses in Europe, a first Kapellmeister never touches a piano, only leads rehearsals like this. So Anyway.
Okay, let me translate some of that. Şimdi Avrupa'da eğer opera ile ilgili özellikle de sürekli bir iş istiyorsanız mutlaka piyano çalıyor olmanız gerekiyor ama öyle o kolay bir iş değil. Çünkü opera şeylerinde piyano partileri genelde inanılmaz derecede zor olabiliyor. İşte Michael Singer'da olduğu gibi dedi. Eğer asistan şey olarak, şef olarak çalışacaksanız duruma göre bu farklı olabiliyor dedi. Çalgı kısmında şeyi söyledi. Özellikle liderliğin biraz daha farklı bir nokta olduğunu. Aslında 19 yaşında bir çok yetenekli bir müzisyenin de hemen orkestra şefliği eğitimi alabileceğini ama liderlik kısmının daha geç gelebileceğini söyledim. Great. So Creg, let me ask you a similar question. What instrument do you play, and do you find, because you are supposed to take instrumentation classes while you are learning some about conducting, and when you are learning the instrumentation, you have many textbook material, but it is important to how it feels, to blow a flute or something, I guess. Or how would these percussions, mullets, how they really work. So what kind of instruments have you had a chance to learn?
The funny thing is, I was originally a jazz saxophone player.
Okay.
I mean, I went to the University of North Texas to learn to play in the big bands there. And for me, that was my chamber music. I was actually quite a terrible classical saxophone player. But I've always loved music, period. I was never one kind of a thing. I just love music. I love performing. I love making music with people I liked. And so for me, that, like I said, that was my chamber music, because they would hand you an incredibly complex piece of music. It's one on a part. They'd count you off and you sight read. Nobody's going to give you a cue or do anything. And you just learn. I learned really quick my first semester, especially playing in a lead position, like, all right, so when it's harmonized this way, I listen to this way, and I'm in charge of leading like this. And when it's harmonized like this, I need to listen to this guy and that guy back there, and we balance like this. And I always have one ear on the hi-hat and one ear on the bass, and then we're doing and so you learn real quick how to adjust for everything, because it got very intense. And if I had a player in my section that was out of tune, I got in trouble. And so I learned real quick, dude, you're doing this, you need to make sure you're correcting this and play like this. And so it was, and that was my chamber music. And then going into a concert setting, and I'm like, this is easy. Like, yes. It's listen over there, play this, play the, you play Latin pieces, and suddenly syncopation is nothing.
That's right. Greg, don't you find like the harmony of Romantic era classical composers pretty easy in comparison to the stuff you did in jazz? I mean, I'm not a big jazz head, but I'm in awe of a lot of my colleagues here at this school who do that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the jazz musicians, especially jazz pianists, jazz bass players, are just on another plane when it comes to ear training. And for me, I music theory early on was easy, because they're teaching triads and seventh chords. I'm like, I've been improvising over sharp 11 flat 9 chords all the time. That was just my home base
since you're 15, right?
Yeah. It's because you have to. It's like octatonic scales. Yeah, I was playing over that as a 15-year-old. And we're learning that in Theory 3 and Theory 4. And I'm like, oh, this is easy. So that was my background. And so it's unconventional, but at the same time, it's what makes me who I am. And I think it's given me the strengths that I have. Also, as a jazz saxophone player, I did a lot of doubling. And so I was expected to be just as proficient, even though I wasn't, on the flute and clarinet. And if a part was handed to me and I had a clarinet part, and I just, all right, I'm doing this right now. And it was very much a trial by fire. And so I had that experience. My first 3 years, because my undergraduate was in music education, is I actually taught public school band for 3 years. And in Texas, we start beginners in middle school. And so I taught all the beginner woodwinds, and so I had that familiarity with that. I knew very early on that I wanted to make a switch into orchestra, and so that was just me learning anything and everything that I can. One of the great experiences for me was because I did my master's degree at Southern Methodist University in Dallas. And this is when Jaap van Zweden was he just won the position of music director. And so that was my ear training, is sitting in the audience in his first couple rehearsals and him telling the string players what to do. And of course, the first time you play, he goes, that sounds pretty amazing to me. And then you hear him nitpick and talk about this and do that. And suddenly you go, wait, that sounds so much better. And so that was such a big experience of hearing an expert talk to expert string players and tell them what to do, which isn't always the case, to say, no, do it like this with this kind of vibrato, and so it was like, I felt like I learned such a massive toolkit just hearing how he communicated certain ideas. And then hearing the difference between this is before they did it and here's this what it's like after they did it. And you can't unhear these things, So we've talked about the experience necessary for conducting. And what's so hard is nobody gives you any opportunities because you have no experience. But how do you get up on the podium without experience? And I, as a teacher, especially with my music education students, I try to give them as much podium time, not just to wave their hands, but to teach them to hear on the podium, because that's something you don't get the opportunities to do. Yes. And I try to tell them, I said, okay, just everybody close your ears, listen to this, this, and this, because they're doing this. And then you hear it and you go, you now can't unhear that. Every time you hear it wrong, it is now burned in your brain. And it's like, and here's how you fix it. And so at the very least, trying to teach future conductors how to be able to hear as well as how to wave their hands.
Sounds great. Jordan, let me ask you about professional orchestras in United States in general, but the ones that you worked with. What are the rehearsal routines? For example, do you have usually 5 rehearsals, fixed 5 rehearsals, 3 hours each, and a concert? Is that like pretty much the standard thing?
I think it depends. I think if you're talking about the top orchestras of major cities, for an average program that doesn't require extra consideration for a typical program, there would probably be 3 rehearsals, and then an open dress or a run through. Usually, with minimal stopping. I don't think 3 hours. I think more like 2.5.
Okay.
This is for a standard program with a soloist, with an overture, with a repertory symphony or something. And for a regional orchestra, we played together in the Tallahassee Symphony Orchestra. Yeah. So it came to my mind. It might be 4 rehearsals. Does that sound right to you?
I guess it was 4. Maybe 5, no? In Turkey, it's 5 in general.
Okay.
But, okay.
Interesting.
4. And we have, for example, 3 hours rehearsals. It starts at 10 a.m. It goes until 1 p.m. And 3 hours. And also 5 days in general. Sometimes if there is a very difficult program, the maestro can ask for an extra rehearsal, like if we are doing a Strauss or something that is really difficult.
I should add that a lot of professional orchestras in the U.S. will do a lot of educational and pops concerts, and it's pretty common to prepare those on one rehearsal.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's a real skill that a conductor needs to be able to prepare something like that. It goes to the heart of your original question, though. The players are expected to be able to work through a short family program or young people's concert in one rehearsal. And the conductor is expected to make no mistakes either, because the time is not, that rehearsal is not time set aside for the conductor to work out his or her problems, conducting concerns. So that it's, and in the old days, when someone like Richard Strauss was first conducting opera, you would do Die Meistersinger with no rehearsal. So the opera tradition was that you just go in the pit. It was very common. I mean, Strauss is just one example. He was a famous conductor in his time. And when he was first working in opera houses in Germany, he would conduct a couple of different operas for the first time with no rehearsal in a given week. And this was after years of having coached the piece at the keyboard and having sat in the pit with the score and watched the conductor many times.
That's interesting. Yeah. By the way, I should translate some of those I forgot to translate. Şimdi tabii ben bir kısmını unutmuş oldum tercüme etmem gereken şeylerden. Ama özellikle sordum. Profesyonel orkestralar ne kadar prova yapıyor. A grubu anladığım kadarıyla 3 prova ile çıkıyorlar ve genelde 2,5 saat civarında bir süreleri oluyor. Şeylerde daha böyle bölgesel orkestralar, biz daha önce Talassi Senfoni'de beraber çalmıştık Jordan'la. Onlarda da 2,5-3 saat diye hatırlıyorum ben bir şekilde. 3 saat, yani birbirine benzer. Ama 4 provayla oluyor ve konser olmuş oluyor. Onun dışında Creg'in söylediği şeylerden hatırlamaya çalışıyorum. Well, I forgot some of the stuff that you just said, but can you just remind me a little bit of it that you were talking about the instruments? Okay, I remember. Hold on. Caz saksafoncusuymuş. Zaten çok küçük yaşlardan itibaren caz saksafonu çalmış ve grup olarak çaldıkları için armoni bilgisi de, bilgi demeyeyim, armoni onun hani yiyip yuttuğu bir şey haline gelmiş. Hatta üniversiteye girip de orkestra şefliği okumaya başladığı zaman o armoni dersleri onun için çocuk oyuncağı gibi olmuş. Çünkü o sırada zaten hali hazırda işte caz akorlarının üstüne doğaçlama yapma gibi zorunlu ihtiyaçları varmış. Ve sonrasında çok iyi bir yaylı çalgıcının provalarını izlediğini söyledi. Onun yaylı çalgılara nasıl problem çözdüğünü öğrendiğini söyledi. Ve onun da çok büyük faydasını gördüğünü söyledi. Well, guys, thank you very much. It was really a pleasure to be with you too. And I hope to see you again one time. I mean, we have never met with Creg before, but I hope in the future we can meet. And
absolutely.
It was nice. It was nice seeing you in New York not too long ago, but now the years are piling up. A few years ago now. So come back again.
Okay. I really wish to do that. Okay. See you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Evet. Şimdi ben son birkaç şey söylemek istiyorum. Benim için gerçekten müthiş bir 4 gün oldu. biraz önce de söylediğim gibi programın başında iyi bir şey olacağını düşünüyordum ama bu kadar işlevli olabileceğini düşünmemiştim. Orkestra şeflerinin ve orkestracıların birbirleriyle diyalog içerisinde olduğu, zaten bir şekilde diyalog içerisindeler tabii. Çünkü beraber çalışıyorlar ama böyle bir platformda birbirlerine söyleyecek şeyleri vardı. Ve özellikle bazı müzikal, aslında oldukça teknik bir şeydi bu, buluşmaydı. Müzikal meselelerden bahsettik. Sosyal kısımlara girmedik bile. Bizim klasik müzik alanında olan herkesin birbiriyle beraber iş yapabiliyor olması, birbirini iyi anlıyor olması, birbirinin niteliğine katkıda bulunuyor olması, özellikle bizlerin yetişkin müzisyenlerin diyelim, sadece hocaların değil, yetişkin bütün müzisyenlerin gençlere de katkıda bulunabiliyor olması çok önemli. Çünkü gençler bizim yarınlarımızı oluşturacaklar. Ve ben açıkçası çok istiyorum ki biz birikimlerimizi onlara en iyi şekilde aktarabilelim. En etkili ve verimli şekilde aktarabilelim. Hatta çekici bir şekilde de aktarabilelim. Yani onların mecralarına girelim. Onların teknik olanaklarını algılayalım. Ve biz ne biliyorsak, biz derken hepimiz. Çünkü ben biliyorum ki pek çok muhteşem müzisyen bilgilerini aktarma konusunda çok becerikli olmayabiliyor. Yani harika bir müzisyen ama bildiği, onda bir altın tozu gibi bir şey bu. Muhteşem bir şey. Nitelik, birikim, donanım. Ve bunlar gerçekten çok zor kazanılıyor. Çok uzun yıllar içerisinde ve çok para harcayarak, çok zaman harcayarak, yurt dışında uzun yıllar okuyarak, ederek onları bir şekilde bir sonraki kuşağa geçirmenin yolunu bulmalıyız. Ve bu konuda da belki de bu çalışma da bunu amaçlı bir şeydi. Elimizde 4 tane videomuz oldu. 1,5-2'şer saatlik. Ve içerisinde son derece nitelikli şeyler konuşuldu. Tekrar yapmak istiyorum. Zaman bulabilirsem özellikle de orkestracıların, Türkiye'de yaşayan müzisyenlerin daha çok yasal hakları, bundan sonra ülkemizde orkestraların statüsünün ne olacağı, bir taraftan başka işlerde de çalışan müzisyenlerin durumu gibi konulara da katkıda bulunmaya çalışacağım.